Welcome to WorldWire. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. The US and China are economic powerhouses, bound by a vast web of trade that links factories in China to homes in America. This relationship is not just about goods moving across oceans. It's about the daily lives of millions of people on both sides of the Pacific, whose jobs, businesses, and futures depend on this connection. Every day, container ships cross the Pacific, delivering goods that fill American stores and fuel Chinese industries. From electronics and clothing to machinery and raw materials, these shipments are the lifeblood of global commerce, keeping shelves stocked and factories humming. This trade has created jobs, lifted millions from poverty, and given consumers more choices than ever. American shoppers benefit from affordable products, while Chinese workers find new opportunities in booming export industries. The ripple effects reach far beyond the ports, shaping economies and communities. But this interdependence is also a source of tension. Any disruption can have global consequences. A single bottleneck at a major port can trigger shortages, price spikes, and uncertainty for businesses and families alike. Politicians argue over trade deficits and market access, but neither side can afford a total breakdown. The stakes are simply too high, with millions of jobs and billions in investments hanging in the balance. The sheer scale is staggering. Hundreds of billions in goods and services flow each year, supporting real jobs and livelihoods. Behind every container is a network of workers, truckers, and businesses, relying on smooth operations. Supply chains are so intertwined that untangling them would be painful for both nations. The complexity of these networks means that even small changes can ripple across the globe, affecting everything from prices to employment. Now, in late 2025, a new dispute threatens this delicate balance, not over tariffs, but over the fees charged to the ships themselves. These new costs could disrupt established routes and force companies to rethink their supply strategies. The world is watching to see if this vital trade link will survive the latest test. As negotiations unfold, the outcome will shape not just the future of US-China trade, but the stability of the global economy itself. To truly grasp the current crisis in global shipping, it's essential to understand the role of port fees. These are the charges that ships must pay to dock, unload, and process their cargo at US ports. These fees are a fundamental part of international trade, affecting the cost and flow of goods around the world. For many years, these port fees remained relatively stable and predictable for all international shipping lines, regardless of their country of origin. Shipping companies could plan their routes and budgets with confidence, knowing what to expect when arriving at American ports. But everything changed in autumn 2025, when the US government introduced a new port security and fair competition fee. This fee was specifically designed to target Chinese vessels, marking a significant departure from previous policy. According to Washington, the new fee was justified on the grounds of national security and the need to create a level playing field for American shipping companies, who claimed they were at a disadvantage against Chinese state-backed competitors. This move came after months of tense negotiations and repeated complaints from US officials about what they described as unfair treatment of American ships in Chinese ports, including higher fees and stricter inspections. The introduction of the new fees made it dramatically more expensive for Chinese ships to dock in the US. Major companies like Costco suddenly faced millions of dollars in additional costs, threatening their profit margins and business models. For example, a single voyage could now be hit with an extra £20,000 in charges, a sum that quickly adds up for companies operating dozens of ships each month. Unsurprisingly, Beijing viewed this move as a direct economic attack rather than a simple regulatory adjustment. Chinese officials and business leaders condemned the fees, calling them discriminatory and politically motivated. The US strategy was clear. By dramatically increasing the cost of doing business for Chinese shipping firms, Washington hoped to pressure China back to the negotiating table and force concessions on trade and port access. The impact was immediate and far-reaching. Shipping costs soared almost overnight, and tensions between the world's two largest economies escalated, sending shockwaves through global supply chains. China was quick to respond, but not in the way many analysts and industry insiders had predicted. The stage was set for a new chapter in the ongoing trade dispute, with both sides bracing for further escalation. China struck back, not with tariffs or public threats, but by quietly targeting US ships at sea, a move that caught many by surprise and signaled a new phase in the ongoing dispute. Instead of escalating the trade war with more taxes, Beijing chose a different battlefield, the world's busiest shipping lanes. Beijing ordered enhanced safety inspections for all U.S.-flagged vessels operating within its near-seas economic zones, including the vital and crowded South China Sea. This region is a lifeline for global commerce, and any disruption here sends shockwaves far beyond Asia. American ships were intercepted, boarded, and subjected to exhaustive inspections that often lasted for hours or even days. These surprise checks left crews anxious and shipping companies scrambling to adjust schedules. As a result, perishable goods spoiled in the heat, factories missed critical production deadlines, and entire supply chains began to unravel. The ripple effects were felt in warehouses and store shelves across the globe. China insisted these were simply routine safety checks, part of standard maritime procedure. But the sudden timing and strictness made the real motive clear. This was calculated retaliation, not coincidence. The uncertainty forced U.S. companies into a difficult choice: risk costly delays and lost cargo, or reroute ships on longer, more expensive journeys to avoid Chinese waters. Either way, the price of doing business soared. This was economic pressure disguised as maritime safety, a demonstration of China's ability to control key shipping lanes and disrupt global trade at will. The message was unmistakable: if you make it hard for our ships, we'll make it just as hard for yours. The standoff at sea became a new front in the conflict. The conflict had moved from paperwork and policy to the open sea, raising the stakes for both sides and leaving the world to watch as tensions threatened to boil over into something much bigger. The fallout from this standoff hit businesses and consumers on both sides of the Pacific. U.S. port fees raised shipping costs for Chinese goods, which were passed on to American companies and, ultimately, shoppers. A small U.S. footwear brand, for example, faced higher freight charges and had to choose between shrinking profits or raising prices. Meanwhile, American farmers exporting to China saw their shipments delayed or rejected, losing sales to competitors in Brazil or Argentina. The disruption didn't just raise prices, it broke business relationships and shifted global trade routes. Shipping companies hiked rates and rerouted vessels, adding time and fuel costs. The price of everything from electronics to toys crept upward. What started as a policy dispute became a tax on global efficiency. Ordinary people everywhere felt the pinch. Behind the headlines, the human cost of the U.S.-China port conflict is real. U.S. businesses relying on Chinese imports faced soaring costs and tough choices: raise prices, cut staff, or risk going under. Workers at ports and warehouses saw hours cut, or jobs threatened as shipping slowed. In China, factory managers lost orders from U.S. brands, forcing layoffs and reduced shifts. Migrant workers in Chinese factories felt the pain, unable to send money home. For consumers, higher shipping costs meant pricier goods. TVs, jeans, toys, all adding up at the checkout. Families already struggling with inflation saw their budgets stretched even thinner. The conflict's ripple effects reached deep into everyday life, far from the negotiating table. All this, triggered by a geopolitical standoff thousands of miles away. As economic pain mounted, pressure grew for a solution. After weeks of tense diplomacy, the U.S. and China agreed to a one-year truce. The U.S. suspended its new port fees. China halted its ship inspections. Trade resumed, bringing relief to businesses and workers caught in the crossfire. But this is only a temporary fix. The core issues remain unresolved. The truce, set to expire in December 2026, buys time for real negotiations. Both sides must now work toward a lasting agreement on fair trade and maritime security. If they succeed, global commerce could stabilize. If not, the crisis may return, even worse. The next year will be crucial for the future of U.S.-China trade and the world economy. This standoff is more than a U.S.-China dispute. It's a test for the globalized world. Open sea lanes and predictable trade are the backbone of prosperity everywhere. When the two largest economies weaponize trade, the shockwaves hit every continent. Supply chains from Europe to South America depend on U.S.-China stability. The episode exposes how vulnerable global commerce is to political conflict. If this trend spreads, international trade could become riskier and more expensive for all. The world is watching, hoping these giants can find common ground before the next crisis. The stakes couldn't be higher for the future of global trade.